On the outside, Emily and Daniel Harper embodied everything their suburban neighborhood aspired to. Their two-story brick home stood proudly at the end of a tree-lined street, the lawn trimmed to perfection, flowers blooming neatly in carefully tended beds. On weekends, they were often seen together, Emily, graceful and warm, waving at neighbors, while Daniel, steady and respectable, carried groceries or mowed the lawn with a quiet smile. They were the couple people pointed to when they wanted to believe marriage still meant something enduring. Friends admired them, co-workers envied them, and even strangers sensed their harmony. But what no one saw was how much effort went into keeping the mask in place. Emily, in her quiet voice, narrated her devotion whenever people asked. She often told others, "Daniel is my anchor, my safe place." And in many ways she believed it. She remembered the early days of their marriage, the laughter, the late-night drives, the way he held her hand like he never wanted to let go. To Emily, love was about sacrifice, and she had given herself fully to the man she believed would never betray her. But Daniel had grown restless. At dinner, his eyes would sometimes glaze over, his fork hovering mid-air as though his thoughts were elsewhere. When Emily asked about his day, he answered in clipped sentences, "Fine, busy, nothing new." She tried to convince herself it was the stress of work, the endless hours at the firm. Yet in the silence that stretched between them at night, Emily felt a distance she couldn't name. Neighbors never noticed. To them, Daniel's distracted smiles and Emily's polite laughter were just part of married life. At Sunday brunches, Emily spoke about Daniel's latest promotion, his dedication to his clients, his work ethic. He nodded in agreement, though his jaw tightened when the conversation turned to long-term plans, children, travel, the future. He would quickly change the subject, leaving Emily to smooth the moment with charm. The cracks in their marriage were subtle but undeniable. Daniel spent more time at the office, coming home later and later, sometimes slipping into bed long after Emily had fallen asleep. On those nights, she woke briefly to the scent of his cologne mingled with something unfamiliar, something she couldn't quite place. She never questioned him directly, afraid that voicing her suspicions might shatter the fragile peace they maintained. Instead, Emily doubled down on being the perfect wife. She hosted dinner parties, kept the house immaculate, and brushed aside her own loneliness with determination. To her, the marriage was worth saving, even if it meant ignoring the unease growing inside her chest. She told herself, all couples go through rough patches. This too will pass. But in the quiet moments when Daniel stared too long at his phone, or when his hand slipped from hers with too little thought, Emily felt a chill. Somewhere beneath the practiced smiles and polite exchanges, something darker was taking root. What Emily could not see, what Daniel refused to admit, was that their flawless image was just that, an image. Behind Daniel's calm demeanor and carefully measured words, secrets stirred like embers waiting to ignite. And once the first spark caught fire, their perfect mask would crumble, exposing truths too devastating to contain. The illusion of harmony was fading. Neither of them knew it yet, but the return of someone from Daniel's past was about to set everything in motion. Next chapter, The Old Friend Returns. It began on an ordinary Thursday evening, when the doorbell rang just as Emily was setting the table for dinner. Daniel, still loosening his tie from a long day, opened the door to a figure from his past, Ethan Cole. Ethan carried himself with an easy charm, his smile bright, his laugh disarming. He looked almost the same as when Daniel had last seen him years ago, confident, magnetic, with eyes that seemed to carry secrets of their own. "Daniel Harper," Ethan greeted, clapping his old friend on the shoulder. "Did you think you could escape me forever?" Daniel froze for half a second, so brief Emily might have missed it, but then his lips curved into a practiced grin. "Ethan, it's been a long time." Emily appeared at the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She was pleasantly surprised by the reunion. Ethan's warmth was immediate, his compliments effortless. Within minutes, he had Emily laughing at old stories about Daniel, mischief from their school days, reckless adventures of youth. "Your husband was a troublemaker," Ethan teased. and Emily glanced at Daniel with playful curiosity. She loved learning details he never shared. Daniel only shrugged, feigning embarrassment, but behind his smile, his shoulders stiffened. Ethan slipped seamlessly into their evening, as if he belonged. He stayed for dinner, charming Emily with stories, toasting Daniel's successes, and praising the home they had built. To Emily, his presence felt like a gift, someone who knew her husband deeply, someone who could bring out the pieces of Daniel she longed to see again. Over the following weeks, Ethan became a frequent visitor. He joined them for weekend brunches, lent a hand with small projects around the house, even accompanied them to neighborhood gatherings. Emily welcomed him without hesitation. To her, Ethan was the kind of friend who added color to their lives, someone who bridged the gap she often felt with Daniel. But beneath the surface, the bond between Ethan and Daniel was more than old friendship. Their conversations stretched into late hours when Emily had gone to bed. Glances lingered a fraction too long. When their shoulders brushed, neither pulled away quickly enough. Emily, in her innocence, dismissed the signs. She thought Daniel's lightheartedness in Ethan's presence was the relief of nostalgia, the joy of rekindling a brotherhood. For the first time in months, Daniel's laughter rang through the house. She clung to the hope that Ethan's presence was healing the distance in her marriage. But Daniel knew better. Each moment with Ethan tugged at a part of himself he had buried long ago. It was a part he had sworn would never surface again, because if it did, it would destroy everything he had built with Emily. Ethan, however, had no such hesitation. His return was not chance. It was deliberate, and beneath his charming exterior lay a hunger that would not be ignored. The Harper home, once steady and predictable, had been unsettled. The door to the past had been opened, and through it, temptation slipped in. What Emily thought was the revival of friendship was, in truth, the beginning of something far more dangerous. Next chapter, Whispers in the Dark. The shift was subtle at first, like shadows creeping across the walls of Emily's life. After Ethan's return, Daniel seemed lighter, freer, even joyful. But as the weeks passed, that lightness took on an edge she couldn't quite name. His laughter was reserved for moments when Ethan was near, while the rest of the time, Emily felt him slipping away. She noticed the phone calls. They began late at night after she had retreated to bed. The muffled ring would pull her from half-sleep, and she would listen to Daniel's voice carried in a hushed tone from the hallway. When she asked, he brushed it off with casual excuses. Work call, he'd say too quickly, eyes averted. Nothing important. But the calls always ended abruptly when she entered the room, as if someone had cut a wire between them. One evening, as Emily stood in the kitchen rinsing dishes, she heard Daniel's voice, low, urgent, through the crack in the back door. She paused, soap suds slipping through her fingers. I can't tonight, he whispered. A pause, then softer. You don't understand. She'll notice. Emily's chest tightened. She leaned closer, heart pounding. But the moment her foot creaked on the tile, Daniel's tone shifted into rehearsed indifference. Right, tomorrow then. He re-entered the house seconds later, forcing a smile. You startled me, he said, avoiding her eyes. It was just a colleague. Nothing serious. The word colleague clanged like a false note. Emily wanted to believe him, but suspicion gnawed at her. She tried to remind herself of their years together, of the loyalty she thought unshakable. Still, the late nights multiplied, the explanations grew thinner, and the space between them widened into silence. Daniel, meanwhile, was a man at war with himself. His nights with Ethan left him both exhilarated and poisoned with guilt. Ethan's touch reignited desires he had long buried, but with every embrace the weight of betrayal pressed heavier on his chest. At home, Emily's devotion became unbearable. Her trust a mirror reflecting his lies. He wanted to tell her, to rip away the mask, but the words withered on his tongue. He feared the ruin it would bring, the collapse of their marriage, the judgment of the community, the shattering of the life they had built. And yet the thought of living without Ethan left him hollow. The duality consumed him, husband by day, lover by night. Emily felt the change in her bones. She began to notice the smallest details, the faint cologne on Daniel's shirts that wasn't hers, the way his fingers hovered over his phone as if guarding it, the distracted glances during dinner. Each sign was a whisper in the dark, urging her to look closer, to question what she feared to know. One night she reached for him in bed, desperate to feel his closeness. He flinched as if burned. "Daniel, what's happening to us?" Her voice trembled with both love and dread. He turned onto his side, away from her gaze. "I'm just tired. Work's been insane." The excuse was rehearsed, spoken too easily. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument could have been. Emily lay awake long after his breathing settled, staring into the dark, her heart breaking with every beat. She no longer knew if she was imagining things, or if the man beside her was already lost to someone else. Daniel, eyes wide open despite his stillness, replayed Ethan's words in his mind. "She'll never love you the way I do." And in that moment, both husband and wife knew, though neither dared to speak it aloud, that something in their marriage had already begun to fracture beyond repair. The night carried their secrets, whispering them back like echoes neither could silence. Next chapter, the bond rekindled. The whispers in the dark soon grew into shadows Emily could no longer ignore. Daniel's absence stretched from hours to entire nights, his excuses thinning until they were almost insulting. Yet the truth wasn't in what he told her. It was in the glances she caught, the faint traces of someone else lingering on his skin. Daniel had surrendered to the pull he had fought for years. With Ethan, there was no need for masks. Their meetings began innocently enough. A late-night drive to catch up, a beer shared on Ethan's porch. But the silences between words became louder than the conversations themselves. Filled with years of longing neither had dared to voice. One night, parked on a deserted stretch of road just beyond the city, Daniel confessed what had been clawing at him. "I can't keep pretending," he whispered, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles whitened. Ethan leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Then don't." The kiss that followed shattered whatever walls Daniel had left. It was reckless, electric, and terrifying. For the first time in years, he felt seen, not as the husband, the provider, the man with responsibilities, but as the boy Ethan had once known, the one who had loved without boundaries. Their affair spiraled quickly. Secret messages buzzed on Daniel's phone at all hours, hidden beneath the guise of work emails. Stolen afternoons became their sanctuary, hotel rooms where time stood still, where passion drowned out the gnawing guilt that awaited outside. But with every touch, Daniel felt the vice of his double life tighten. At home, Emily's kindness became unbearable. The dinners she prepared, the warmth in her voice, the trust in her eyes, it all pressed against his conscience like a weight he couldn't carry. He lay beside her at night, body rigid, mind elsewhere. She reached for him, but his arms felt heavy, reluctant. Emily sensed it, though she tried to deny it. "Are you happy?" she asked one evening, her voice fragile. Daniel forced a smile, but inside panic flared. He wanted to tell her everything, to free himself from the suffocating cage of their marriage. Yet the thought of shattering her, and of exposing his truth to a world that would never forgive, kept him silent. Ethan grew impatient with secrecy. "She doesn't own you," he said during one of their clandestine meetings. "Why keep torturing yourself? Choose us." But Daniel couldn't. The love that bound him to Ethan was real, yet so was the fear of losing everything he had built with Emily. His life had become a pendulum, swinging violently between desire and duty. The affair, intoxicating as it was also a trap. Every stolen moment deepened his dependency, while every lie he told Emily dug him deeper into a grave he couldn't escape. For Ethan, the affair was liberation. For Daniel, it was suffocation dressed as freedom. And though Emily remained blind to the full truth, her instincts were sharpening. The man she loved was slipping away, and she knew, whether by lies or by silence, she was on the brink of uncovering something that would change everything. The line between love and betrayal had already been crossed. Next chapter, Emily's unease. It was late afternoon when Emily noticed the glow of Daniel's phone on the kitchen counter. He had left it unattended while stepping outside to take out the trash. Normally, she never snooped. She prided herself on trust. But something in her gut urged her forward. The screen lit with a new message. Just one line, but enough to freeze her blood. "Can't wait to feel you again. Tonight?" The name attached, Ethan. Emily's heart pounded in her ears. Her first instinct was disbelief. Surely it was a joke, some misguided attempt at humor between friends. Yet the intimacy in the words was undeniable. Her hand trembled as she set the phone back, guilt flooding her even as suspicion burned brighter. When Daniel returned, she tried to compose herself. But over dinner, her eyes lingered on him, searching for cracks in his calm exterior. Finally, she asked, "Do you think Ethan ever crosses lines with his jokes?" Daniel looked up, fork halfway to his mouth. For a fraction of a second, his expression flickered, something sharp, defensive, before softening into a chuckle. "Ethan, you know him. He's always been dramatic. He probably sent something stupid again," Emily pressed, unable to let it go. It didn't feel like a joke. The warmth drained from Daniel's face. He set his fork down, leaning forward with practiced seriousness. "Emily, you've been stressed. Work, the house, everything. It's making you see things that aren't there." His tone was steady, calm, almost patronizing. "Ethan and I have history, yes, but it's friendship. That's all." "You're reading too much into nothing," her throat tightened. "I'm not imagining what I saw." Daniel's eyes locked onto hers, sharp now, a controlled intensity that made her stomach twist. "Then maybe the problem isn't me. Maybe it's trust. If you can't trust me, what do we even have?" The accusation hung in the air like a blade. Emily faltered, shame seeping into her suspicion. She hated doubting him. She hated more how easily his words made her question her own judgment. "Maybe you're right," she whispered, lowering her gaze. Daniel reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I love you," he said softly, the tenderness rehearsed, the lie hidden beneath layers of guilt. She nodded, forcing a smile, but the seed had been planted. That text replayed in her mind again and again, no matter how often she told herself it could be meaningless. That night, while Daniel slept soundly beside her, Emily stared into the dark, wide awake. Every beat of her heart was a reminder something was wrong. Something was being kept from her. And though he had twisted her doubts into weakness, she knew one truth with absolute certainty. Her marriage was not as perfect as it appeared. For the first time, Emily understood that silence would no longer protect her. She had to find answers, even if they destroyed everything. Next chapter. A dangerous triangle, Daniel's life had become a careful balancing act, one that left him gasping for air. By day, he played the dutiful husband, nodding along as Emily spoke about plans for the future, her voice full of fragile hope. By night, he was consumed by Ethan, their stolen embraces, the fire of a love he had long denied himself. But the lines were blurring, and his composure was unraveling. "Daniel, we can't keep living like this," Ethan whispered one evening as they sat in his apartment, blinds drawn tight. His hand lingered on Daniel's. "You have to choose. Her or me." The ultimatum sliced through Daniel. His chest tightened as he pulled his hand away, pacing the room. "It's not that simple." "It is," Ethan shot back, frustration rising. "You can't keep lying to both of us. I won't be your secret forever." Those words echoed in Daniel's head long after he left Ethan's apartment. Driving home, the weight of deception pressed against him, heavier than ever. When he stepped into the house, Emily was waiting. She had prepared his favorite meal, candles lit at the table, as if love could be coaxed back with warmth and patience. "I thought we could have a fresh start tonight," she said gently, searching his face for a spark of the man she had married. Daniel forced a smile, but his eyes betrayed him. He couldn't hold her gaze for long. Over dinner, she tried again. "I know things have been hard, but we can fix this. Whatever's wrong, we can face it together." Her voice trembled, but her sincerity was undeniable. For a brief moment, Daniel wanted to believe her, to let her love mend the fractures. Yet Ethan's voice haunted him. "Choose." Caught between two worlds, Daniel grew more unstable. The lies he told Emily grew thinner, his excuses less convincing. Each deception was a stone added to the weight crushing his soul. At night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Emily slept beside him. The silence of their bedroom was suffocating. Across town, Ethan waited for him, demanding a future Daniel wasn't sure he could give. His life had become a trap of his own making. Every path forward led to ruin. Betray Emily and lose everything they had built, or betray Ethan and lose the only truth he had ever dared to claim. For Daniel, there was no escape, only the slow, inevitable collapse of the worlds he was trying to hold apart, and with every passing day, the cracks were spreading faster. Next chapter. The night of the party. The evening was meant to be ordinary, a casual gathering with friends, laughter, and the easy rhythm of shared memories. Emily had spent hours preparing herself, determined to show Daniel that she could still be the partner he needed. She wore the dress he once adored, her smile carefully practiced, her heart quietly desperate. The house buzzed with conversation and clinking glasses. Daniel moved through the crowd with a practiced charm, shaking hands and laughing at the right moments. But Emily could see the strain beneath his mask. He wasn't truly there. His eyes kept drifting across the room, to Ethan. The moment their gazes met, Emily felt a shift in the air, subtle but undeniable. It wasn't just friendship that passed between them. It was something intimate, something raw. Ethan's hand lingered a second too long on Daniel's shoulder. Daniel's laughter came a shade too quickly at Ethan's jokes. To others it might have seemed harmless, but to Emily, it was a spotlight cutting through the fog of her doubts. As she stood by the drink table, glass trembling in her hand, she realized the truth she had been avoiding was now undeniable. She wasn't imagining things. The secret had a face, a name, and it was standing only feet away. She watched, her chest tightening, as Ethan leaned in close to whisper something to Daniel. The look that passed between them was not the look of friends. It was hunger, longing, and recognition of a bond they could no longer disguise. Emily's world tilted. The laughter around her blurred into white noise. Every word of reassurance Daniel had offered her, every denial, now felt like shards cutting into her. She forced a steady breath, willing herself not to collapse in the middle of the room. That night, when the guests had left and the house fell quiet, Emily's decision crystallized. She could no longer live in shadows, trapped between suspicion and denial. The answers would not be handed to her. She would have to seek them out. She sat alone in the darkened living room, the echo of their stolen glances replaying in her mind. Her hands clenched into fists. She didn't know if uncovering the truth would destroy her marriage, her sanity, or even her safety. But she was ready. The mask had cracked. Now she would tear it off completely. Next chapter, the evidence uncovered. The night after the gathering, Emily could no longer rest. Every glance, every whispered word between Daniel and Ethan replayed in her mind, like a cruel film she couldn't switch off. She waited until Daniel drifted into a restless sleep, his phone resting on the nightstand, screen glowing faintly in the dark. Her hands shook as she reached for it, her heart pounding with the weight of what she was about to do. The phone opened easily. Daniel had never bothered to change the password, a sign of trust or arrogance. Emily scrolled through his messages, each one stabbing deeper than the last. Hidden under casual conversations were threads laced with intimacy, late-night confessions, and plans they had carefully disguised. One message from Ethan froze her in place. "I can't stand hiding anymore. You belong with me, not her." Emily's chest tightened, the air sucked from the room. Proof. Real, undeniable proof. No longer whispers in the dark or fleeting suspicions. This was betrayal in black and white. An affair woven through her life while she played the role of the devoted wife. By morning, she had rehearsed what she would say, but when the moment came, all composure dissolved. She slammed the phone down on the kitchen table as Daniel entered, bleary-eyed. "Explain this," she demanded, her voice shaking, not from weakness but from fury. Daniel froze, his face draining of color as he glanced at the screen. For a long moment, silence hung between them like a guillotine. Then denial spilled from his lips. "You're twisting things. You don't understand. Don't lie to me." Emily's shout cracked the air. "I saw it. The messages, the meetings, the touches you thought I wouldn't notice. How long have you been betraying me, Daniel? How long have you been lying to my face?" His defenses crumbled into anger. "You think this is all about you? You think you're the victim? You never saw me. Not who I really am." His voice rose, raw and trembling. "With Ethan, I feel alive. Do you even know what that's like?" The words struck like blows. Emily staggered back, tears burning her eyes. but she refused to let him see her break. Years of silence, of pretending, erupted all at once. Every doubt, every unanswered question clawed its way out in screams and sobs. Daniel's fists clenched at his sides, his breathing ragged. "I can't do this anymore," he growled, grabbing his coat from the chair. Without another word, he stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. Emily stood in the wreckage of their home, her body trembling, the silence deafening after the storm of accusations. She felt hollow, shattered, as though the ground beneath her had been ripped away. Through the window, she watched Daniel disappear into the night, his figure swallowed by darkness. She didn't know where he was going, but deep down she already suspected. Rage and confusion weren't sending him away from Ethan. They were driving him straight to him. The illusions of their perfect marriage had shattered, and the pieces cut deeper than she ever imagined. Next chapter, Dangerous Liaisons. Daniel's footsteps echoed in the cold night as he stormed through the streets, Emily's words still clawing at his mind. His chest heaved, torn between rage, shame, and a desperate need for comfort. He found himself outside Ethan's apartment before he even realized where he was going. The lights inside glowed softly, a beacon pulling him closer. Ethan opened the door almost instantly, his face etched with worry. "Daniel, what happened?" Daniel shoved past him, pacing the living room like a caged animal. "She knows, Ethan. Emily knows everything." Ethan's jaw tightened, then softened into something like relief. "Good. Maybe it's time the truth is finally out. You don't have to keep living two lives anymore. You can be with me now." But Daniel shook his head violently, gripping his hair. "You don't understand. She looked at me like I was nothing, like I was some monster. My whole life is ruined. My career, my reputation. It's all over." Ethan stepped closer, reaching for him. "Then let it be over. We still have each other? Isn't that enough?" Daniel recoiled, his eyes wild. "You don't get it. I can't just erase everything. I can't destroy the life I built for her, for us, for me." Frustration hardened Ethan's voice. "Stop lying to yourself. You've been hiding for years and I've been patient. But I won't be your secret anymore. You have to choose her or me." The ultimatum struck like lightning. Daniel's breathing grew ragged, his chest rising and falling as silence stretched between them. Then his voice cracked into a snarl. "Don't corner me, Ethan. Don't make me do this." "What?" "Do what?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "The only thing destroying you is your cowardice." The words ignited something feral in Daniel. He lunged, shoving Ethan backward. Furniture toppled, glass shattered, their struggle filling the apartment with chaos. Ethan fought back, his strength fueled by betrayal and heartbreak. But Daniel's desperation was heavier, driven not by love but by fear. In the frenzy, Daniel's hand closed around a heavy glass bottle from the table. He swung wildly, the crack of impact slicing through the room. Ethan collapsed, his body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. Daniel froze, staring at the blood pooling beneath his best friend, the silence now deafening. His chest heaved as he dropped the bottle, its shards glinting under the dim light. Ethan's eyes, once full of longing, now stared blankly into nothingness. Daniel staggered back, trembling. The reality crashed down on him. There was no undoing this. The affair, the lies, the marriage, all of it had led to this moment of irreversible destruction. Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed faintly, growing louder with every passing second. The night had claimed its victim, but the consequences were only beginning. Next chapter, the wife's discovery. Emily's phone buzzed violently against the nightstand, pulling her from restless sleep. At first, she thought it was just another nightmare, her mind replaying the confrontation with Daniel, the venom in his voice, the look in his eyes before he stormed out. But when she answered, the urgency in the officer's tone shattered any illusion. "Mrs. Clark, you need to come to 14th and Main. It's about your husband." Her body went cold. She didn't even ask why. Her instincts told her the truth was worse than anything she could imagine. Within minutes, she was behind the wheel, her hands trembling against the steering wheel as the empty streets blurred by. When she turned the final corner, the sight stole her breath. Blue and red lights pulsed against the darkened buildings, painting the scene in hues of tragedy. A stretcher was being wheeled out of Ethan's apartment building, a white sheet covering the figure beneath. Emily froze in place, her stomach churning as bile rose in her throat. She didn't need to see his face to know. Ethan was gone. Her eyes darted desperately, searching, and then she saw him. Daniel, her husband, standing in the harsh glare of a spotlight, his hands cuffed behind his back. His face was pale, almost unrecognizable, like the life had already been drained out of him. Daniel. The word escaped her lips in a broken whisper, but when his eyes met hers, there was no warmth, no remorse, only emptiness. An officer blocked her path as she stumbled forward. "Ma'am, you can't go in there. This is an active crime scene. I need to know what happened," Emily pleaded, her voice cracking. The officer's tone softened, but his words cut like a blade. "Your husband was found inside the apartment with the victim. He's being taken in for questioning." Emily shook her head violently, as if denial could turn back time. No, that can't be right. He wouldn't. Yet deep down she knew. The suspicions, the texts, the coldness in his eyes, it had all been pointing to this moment. Her gaze returned to the stretcher as it slid into the back of the ambulance. For years Ethan had been part of their lives, someone she thought was family. Now he was nothing more than a body carried into the night, and Daniel, the man she had loved, defended, fought for, was the one in chains. A gust of cold wind cut through her as the police car door slammed, sealing Daniel inside. The reality sank in with crushing weight. Her marriage, her trust, her very life had been shattered in one violent night. Emily's knees nearly buckled, but she forced herself to stand, gripping the car door beside her for balance. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was blood, death, and the irreversible end of everything she thought she knew. The sirens wailed again, carrying Daniel away into the darkness, while Emily stood frozen, alone, devastated, embracing herself for the storm that was yet to come. Next chapter, Courtroom Confessions. The courthouse buzzed with whispers, each murmur carrying fragments of judgment, speculation, and morbid fascination. Reporters crowded the steps, their cameras flashing as Daniel was escorted inside, shackled at the wrists. Emily followed behind, not as his wife anymore, but as a witness to the destruction of the life they had built. Inside, the courtroom felt like a theater of grief. The judge's gavel silenced the noise, but nothing could silence the storm within Emily's chest. She took her seat, clutching her statement like a lifeline, though her trembling hands betrayed the calm face she tried to wear. When her name was called, she rose on unsteady legs. The courtroom seemed to blur, the faces of strangers, the cold eyes of the jury, the steady gaze of Daniel, locked on her as if she held his fate in her hands. Her testimony began haltingly, words catching in her throat. She spoke of the marriage, the cracks she had ignored, the nights Daniel grew distant. She recalled the texts, the cold confrontations, the final fight before he stormed into the night. Her voice broke when she mentioned Ethan, his laugh, his presence, and the betrayal hidden beneath it all. "Did you suspect the nature of their relationship?" The prosecutor asked gently. Emily's breath shuddered. "I did, but I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to believe my husband still loved me." Gasps rippled across the room. Daniel bowed his head, his jaw clenched. When his turn came, the atmosphere shifted. His lawyer's voice was steady, but Daniel's own was raw, cracked with years of repression. He confessed to the affair, not with pride, but with the exhaustion of a man who had carried a secret too heavy for too long. He spoke of Ethan, of a love denied, of fear that exposure would destroy everything, his career, his marriage, his image. But then came the moment that silenced even the judge's stern face. Daniel described the argument, the rage, the panic, the shove that became a struggle. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, his voice trembling. "But when I saw the blood, I knew nothing would ever be the same." The confession hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. Emily closed her eyes, tears slipping free. Not for the man she once loved, but for the wreckage he had left behind. The gavel struck again, echoing like a funeral bell. Truth had finally been spoken, but it brought no relief, only devastation that no verdict could ever heal. Next chapter. The price of silence. The house stood in silence, its walls heavy with memories that no longer felt like her own. Emily moved through the rooms like a ghost, her footsteps muffled against carpets once warmed by laughter, now stained by the echoes of betrayal. The framed photographs on the mantel stared back at her with hollow smiles, smiles she once believed in, smiles that now mocked her. She paused at one in particular, their wedding portrait. Daniel's arm around her waist, his lips curled in the promise of devotion. She traced the glass with her fingertips, but the warmth of that day was gone. All she could see now was the lie hidden behind his eyes. The trial had ended. The verdict delivered. Daniel would spend years behind prison walls, a man undone not by strangers, but by the love and loyalty he could never reconcile. Ethan was gone, his life reduced to evidence tags and autopsy reports. And Emily, she was left with fragments, forced to live among the ruins of what she once called a marriage. She sat at the edge of the bed, the same bed where countless nights of doubt had consumed her. The silence pressed against her ears until it was unbearable. For so long she had begged for answers, begged Daniel to speak the truth. And when he finally had, the words were knives. I loved him, Emily, more than I could ever love you. That confession haunted her more than the violence, more than the courtroom whispers. It was the final confirmation that their life together had been a facade, an arrangement built on appearances, on survival, on fear. Outside, the world moved on. Neighbors lowered their voices when she walked past. Friends who once filled her calendar with dinners and outings now kept their distance, unsure of what to say. She didn't blame them. After all, how does one comfort a woman who discovered her husband's love only through the blood he spilled? Emily turned to the window, the night stretching endless beyond the glass. She realized then that silence had been the true weapon in their marriage. Not the arguments, not the gaslighting, not even the betrayal. It was the secrets left unspoken, the truths buried too deep, the whispers exchanged in the dark that destroyed them all. She closed her eyes, letting the silence wash over her, no longer fighting it. In that quiet, she accepted the haunting truth. Sometimes the deadliest betrayals aren't shouted in anger, but whispered between husband and wife, until the weight of those whispers crushes everything. Rising slowly, Emily gathered the framed photos from the mantel one by one. She placed them face down, erasing the false smiles from sight. The past was gone, carved into silence, and all that remained was the echo of a life that had never truly been hers. As she turned off the last light and walked away, the house seemed to exhale, empty, hollow, and haunted by secrets it would never tell.